lobby. Let's all go to the lobby, lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello, horror hounds, and welcome to Now Slaying, an It Slays podcast production where we break down the latest and greatest in the world of horror. I'm your not-so-humble host, Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And today on the show, we'll be reviewing The Bride! Which was released March 6, 2026. Exclusively in theaters. Now, Rowan, Frankenstein is one of those seminal works of horror that we've covered in some shape or form on the pod over the years, with discussing those straight-up adaptations like the original 1931 James Whale film, and more recently Guillermo del Toro's adaptation just last year. But also works that were heavily inspired by Frankenstein, such as my personal favorite, of course, Lisa Frankenstein.
Oh, yes,
and,
of course.
And the much-debated Frankenhooker on the show with our friend and guest Willow. This is all to say that although we still haven't covered a lot of the original Universal monsters on the show, I feel like Frankie has, he's been well represented on the show over the years. So now with Maggie Gyllenhaal throwing her hat in the ring with another, not an adaptation of Frankenstein, but a work that's certainly derivative of it, as always, I'm left wondering, where are you looking forward to checking out The Bride?
A little offended that you didn't mention the all-timer of Van Helsing.
Oh,
just iconic Frankenstein in that
Sorry,
one.
I scrolled through all of our episodes very quickly. Did a search for Frank, and I just missed Van Helsing. I'm sorry to say.
It's understandable. I was morbidly curious about this, I guess. I did.
Okay.
So it's kind of hard for me. I know how much, especially reevaluated, like how important Bride of Frankenstein is, and like queer culture and queer cinema and feminist cinema, and a lot of people I personally know like that one better than Frankenstein. I've never seen
I'm
it.
one of those people.
Oh, there you go.
So I haven't seen the first Frankenstein. I've only seen Bride of Frankenstein, and I thought it was pretty great.
Oh, really? You weren't on that episode. I forgot.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
No, I missed it.
Yeah, well, this will be an interesting conversation, yeah, because I've never seen that one, so I don't know anything about it. I have no reference point to it, but obviously, I think most people, you don't even really have to be in the horror to know kind of the iconography of the Bride of Frankenstein. I mean, they sell Bride of Frankenstein stuff at like Michael's every Halloween. So, and I was interested. I don't know a lot about Maggie Gyllenhaal as a filmmaker. I never saw her first movie. Obviously, like everyone else, I know her as an actor. For me, most iconically, Donnie Darko. And, I know she's in, like, The Dark Knight and stuff, but not someone I overly think about, really, other than just being Jake Gyllenhaal's sister. So, I was curious, and obviously more curious as it came out, like, Christian Bale being in this, and Penelope Cruz, and one of the Sascards, and I was like, okay, like, now I'm kind of getting interested just from the cast, but that's pretty much all I knew about it, and then after they announced it, I kind of just didn't really think about it till it was coming out. What about you?
Yeah, so I'm one of those people that I actually have seen Maggie Gyllenhaal's first feature, The Lost Daughter. And honestly, I picked it for one of my movie nights with my friend Grace, and I remember us both thinking it was just a complete bore. Like, it was difficult to watch, and even the fact that it starred Olivia Colman, who's obviously an excellent actress, and, also the bride herself, Jessie Buckley, was in that movie as well, and Jessie Buckley, as we'll discuss numerous times throughout this episode, I think she's a great actress. She's been someone I've been watching for years, and it's the sort of thing that I'm always rooting for her and the projects she chooses to kind of stand out and be the best part of the project. But leading up to this film's release, I thought the trailers were not necessarily good, but I guess they were engaging in a sort of way, like sitting in the theater, the loud music, kind of how, I don't know, like in your face the movie was. It's kind of become like a running joke on social media that you can't really discuss this movie without mentioning that it's a big swing. And the fact of the matter is, like, just watching those trailers, it was reminding me of Cruella or Joker Folie à Deux. And, it just comes off as this big, eccentric swing that could wind up being a great movie or a crashing and burning. And of course, leading up to the release of this, even though I happened to see it on the Thursday night previews in IMAX, it was impossible to avoid those early reviews unless you literally avoided the internet. You knew going in that this was at the very least divisive, but the early word as well was just that it was a terrible movie. So it certainly tempered my expectations. I will say that, yes, the cast involved, as I mentioned, Jesse Buckley, but also Christian Bale, who hasn't been in anything since I think like Thor, Love and Thunder, and then before that it was a couple of years as well. I expected him to be very choosy about his projects, so I was thinking, listen, even if this movie's a mess, we do have some good actors involved. Hopefully they can elevate whatever material they're given, and then hopefully this style or this attitude or this loudness kind of comes through and it makes, a full feature film that's worth checking out. The fact that it's an $80 million movie and it was over 2 hours long, all these things kind of going into it had me a little bit apprehensive. I'm not going to lie, walking into the theater. So now after seeing it, shall we live happily ever after? Well, before we get into that, let's throw it on over to the trailer.
Frankenstein. What if she's monstrous? There's just 1,000 things that can go terribly wrong.
I will love her.
Your bride, Frank.
The Bride, rated R, only in theaters March 6th.
The Bride was written and directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal, and the story is as follows. In 1930s Chicago, after a century left all by his lonesome, Frankenstein asks Dr. Euphronius for her help in creating him a companion. They soon give life to a murdered woman now known as the Bride, sparking romance, police investigation, and radical social change. Now, here on Now Slag, we like to keep things relatively spoiler-free up front before getting into the more in-depth, spoiler-filled discussion. So, Rowan, what are your spoiler-free thoughts on The Bride? Exclamation mark.
Exclamation mark, of course.
Absolutely.
I have 3 words with an exclamation mark at the end of it. It's called, what a mess. That is the overall summary of everything I'm sure I will be talking about in this. This is, first of all, nothing that I expected this to be came into fruition. This was nothing that I thought. I didn't know I was going to be going into a movie that feels more embedded in, it feels more like a movie that came out like 10, 15 years ago than it does of now.
Yeah.
I just thought an overly confused movie of what it wanted to say, what it wanted to do, what it wanted out of its performances. The performances are wild. Like the performances, I think Jesse Buckley, I think Christian Bale are both swinging for the fences and what they're doing. Does it necessarily work? I'm not 100% sure on this. I made the joke earlier about the superior Frankenstein portrayal in Van Helsing, which may still hold up true. After seeing this, I guess I didn't overall see what Maggie Gyllenhaal's vision was for this. I get that it's kind of this feminist retelling of The Bride of Frankenstein, because obviously, when, as I said before, I'm like, oh, the original Bride of Frankenstein's this feminist queer text now, but obviously that's as it was reevaluated in time now. And this just, to me, has so little connection to Frankenstein or what I know about The Bride of Frankenstein that it's just we're going to use this IP, but other than that, just kind of, shit on the original material. And I just think it hurts overall because I think people that are going to go into it that I love The Bride of Frankenstein or I love Frankenstein, I love this monster lore are going to be disappointed. I think the movie, and I'm trying not to say this rudely and I really don't want it to come across that rude, but I think the movie plays dumb. I think a lot of the messaging, a lot of the points are getting across it treats you as a viewer like you are stupid. And everything is so in your face and has to like be so blatant and just like they're expecting that, you know, we're watching this with just like drool hanging out of our mouths and that we're not going to understand what this movie is trying to portray, what this movie is trying to say. And honestly, it's like, you know, you're not the first one to do this. You're not the first one to say these things. So, you know, like I said, if this came out 15 years ago, it would have been, maybe it would have been, you know, a real trailblazer. But now it's just behind the pack, the way I look at it. Mm-hmm. You know, as I always like to talk about in any movie, I thought the music was wildly confusing in this. Some of the most horrendous mixing and scoring I've ever heard. There's scenes in this where they have like orchestral stuff going on, but then they're trying to like mix it in with like almost like some sort of like industrial modern music. And it just, the music actually sounds like noise, like just not even music, barely. Like you can't even tell what they're trying to play you. And I just think the tone was everywhere. I mean, I feel like there's got to be 8 million people that have made the joke, but as soon as I got into the theater, I was talking to my partner and she was like, how's the movie? And I was like, this is literally what it would be like if Hot Topic made a movie. Like, I was like, this is what it would be. It's just every poster child emo dream in a film. Like, how did you feel about like the tone and the themes and
basically a lot of what you're saying I resonate completely with. The one thing I wrote down is that you mentioned that it plays dumb, and I just want to specify or clarify this because as you were discussing it, I was hearing people saying like, well, these are themes that are important, you know, like the need for like women's autonomy, being able to make their own decisions, especially like in some of the things that are happening in the States. You know, obviously these are important themes and you can deliver them in a movie with a sledgehammer, you know, yeah. Something like The Substance a couple years ago. That movie's not subtle in the slightest, but I don't think the movie also thinks that it's so clever and this beautiful piece of art. And even though I do think it is clever and very artistic in a lot of respects, I think the movie is completely fine with being a sledgehammer. This movie is a mixture between being a sledgehammer but thinking it's a scalpel, and it winds up with a lot of very embarrassing moments where it's explaining things in such a layman's way and so stupidly that you can't really help but just cringe at it. This is obviously a movie that it's big, it's loud, it's in your face, it's audacious. It's one of those movies that I feel like it's full of anger and an attitude from behind the scenes. Like, you very much feel like Maggie Gyllenhaal had something she wanted to say. I do completely agree with you. I think she's 10 years, possibly 15 years too late with this messaging. And it's the sort of thing that you will know within 10 to 15 minutes if what she wants to say is striking a chord with you, or if it's just not resonating whatsoever. And for me, it was the latter. I did not care for this movie really whatsoever. Stylistically, you mentioned it as Hot Topic. For me, it's like this bastard child of Suicide Squad, Joker, Cruella, with a little bit of like this pretentiousness mixed in, kind of quoting like Mary Shelley prose. And it all just comes together for me as like extremely corny. And then to make it even worse, it kind of wants to adopt that this is like this punk rock, fuck the system sort of energy. But it's also like this huge $80 million kind of girl boss narrative that, like I said, it just wouldn't have even been novel if it was 10 years ago, alone now. Jesse Buckley and Christian Bale, they give committed performances. Even if often I don't like the material they're working with or how they were directed in a given scene, I don't think the performances ever rang false or phoned into me whatsoever, which is pretty incredible considering what they have to do. But Buckley in particular, she has some real go for broke moments in this. And to me, it feels like she's a shoo-in for like a Razzie nomination later this year. Not because I necessarily think she's earned it, because she's likely going to win the Oscar next weekend. And this movie is undoubtedly going to be hated, and it's super easy to grab clips from this movie where she just looks completely batshit insane, and in a vacuum with absolutely no context or any setup to how this movie is explained, she is going to look awful. Like atrocious, which I hate because Jessie Buckley's an actress that I've really admired for quite some years now. Yeah. I've been following. You mentioned about being disrespectful to the original text, and I've seen the original Bride of Frankenstein, but I don't remember it in that detail that I can actually say like, oh, this is where it was derivative of it. This is where it deviated. This is where it's obviously spitting in its face. This is like, oh, it's paying homage to. But what I will say is there's a framing device into movie as to why this movie exists and how it took shape that it genuinely surprised me. And for a couple of minutes, it did pique my interest in how it was going to develop throughout the course of the movie. What I will say is the way it develops, to me, it's disrespectful to the original Frankenstein novel, to the author, Mary Shelley herself. And when it does rear its head, it's always done comedically, but also like it works less and less as the movie goes on, to where it's like beating a dead horse, to where I'm like actually covering my face halfly in the cinema because I'm cringing with embarrassment at what I'm seeing. This is one of those movies where I basically hated everything about it as I watched it, other than the sheer talent of the two leads that I know they are good actors. And sometimes, like I said, they were doing something that like I didn't hate what was happening because the performance was good, or conceptually how it explains its existence. I think there's a kernel of a cool idea there, even though it doesn't make good on it. I guess like the best thing I could say about it is that I didn't think it was boring, but the reason why I didn't think it was boring was because it was so like sloppy and mishandled and chaotic that it kept my attention for its runtime, because it's like a train wreck. You know, you just can't look away from it, and you're kind of like the entire time, what am I watching? Something for me too that I've seen with this movie, and I hate how like every movie that has some sort of social discourse around it, it winds up creating this groundswell where it has to be involved in the culture war or something. Yeah. And I've already seen this sentiment growing with this movie of like, well, you don't like this movie because you're a man, and this movie is not for you. Like, there's a very popular podcast that I've been following for probably 10 years. I mean, they've been around for almost 20 years now, this podcast. These people, they happen to be guys. They've reviewed hundreds of movies at this point. He puts up a 2-star review of The Bride and basically says something along the lines of like, well, it's a glib letterbox review because they're going to be covering on the show. And it's like, not sure this worked. And the comments are flooded with like, well, of course, this isn't for you. You can't have a negative opinion of this movie. Like, you don't get it. And the thing is what I'm trying to say is like, you can be a film critic or talk about a movie and not just be like a rampant misogynist, which is why you don't like The Bride. And it's so annoying to have your opinion of this movie completely discounted just because you have a dick, that you can't have a negative comment on this fucking movie. It's like being like an ice cream critic and basically them putting out cilantro ice cream. And it's like, well, you know, some people love cilantro, some people hate it. Some people are genetically predisposed to like or hate it. And it's basically like, what you're saying is, I can't have an opinion on this movie purely just because, oh, well, you're genetically predisposed to not like it. You know, you don't like cilantro. Obviously, you're not going to like it. But it's like, I don't understand why I've been doing this for years. I'm this ice cream critic. I've been talking about movies for years, but I can't comment on this movie now all of a sudden. Like, there's genuine reasons as to why this is a poor movie without it being like, oh, it's due to the feminism. There's loads of feminist movies that like do these messages so much better that it's like, well, why not just rally around those movies? Why do we have to rally around the $80 million Warner Brothers movie? You know, why does that have to be, you know, the main movie that's like, this is a stellar example of feminism in 2026. So anyways, this is a movie. Netflix passed on it. I think Bale is only here because of the Dark Knight connection. And perhaps the most damning thing I can say about this movie is when I left the theater, my Apple Watch notified me that for the past hour and 15 minutes, I had very restless sleep. Now, I didn't sleep at all during this movie. I was wide awake watching it, but my heart rate was so low and I moved so little while watching it. I was so like just not entertained whatsoever. My watch thought I was asleep. So that's either speaking to like I am in, you know, dire health deterioration and I'm going to drop dead within the next week, or this movie was like impacted me so little that despite watching it on the IMAX screen with loudspeakers all around me, it did nothing for me. Like, it did not make me pique my interest, elevate my heart rate at any point in time. I was just completely as if I was dead myself. So yeah, not a good movie, I don't think, is where I lean.
You know, I think it's an interesting question, because I think it's interesting that the movie obviously wants to critique all of this kind of older material and give you this, you know, kind of punk feminist look at the material. But I have a hard time believing it. I don't know if that's the right words, but like basically because, you know, the way I look at it is, you know, it's like pretty punk rock feminist is Frankenstein. Like, is Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein? So I just think it's like interesting in this framework of, you know, probably like one of the most iconic stories of all time, written by a woman, like just, you know, still influences storytelling in every aspect this way. And for this movie just kind of to be like, you know what, like, fuck that material, like that, you know, that's not feminism, this is feminism.
Yeah, feminism is saying I would prefer not to, and just shoving your food away from you when they're offering you food, or I don't want to say that because it's a spoiler, but there's like, feminism is shouting a key word that was in social circles and like very much of the social consciousness 15 years ago. But if you shout it really loud and stomp your feet, then of course it's going to have a lot of impact. Or it's just like, it's ridiculous. I don't know. Like, of course those themes and like these ideas are in the movie, but they are so fractured and so underdeveloped and half-baked that if it focused on one of these key details, this movie may have been somewhat competent, but it's fractured, just like the character's psyche, into 4 or 5 different directions and explores none of them effectively. And I think basically it just boils down to, you're going to like this movie purely because there's feminist messaging, but there should be also loads of other movies that are better than this that you should also like for the same reasons, I would hope. And I don't know. I just think people are kind of paying attention to this just because it's the loudest example of it. The most in-your-face, big, you know, absurd example of it.
Yeah, I mean, this might take the cake for, like, cringiest movie I've ever watched. Like, I felt literal cringe.
Yeah. And people overuse that word. I mean, I use it all the time on this podcast, that it's like, I cringed at, like, a line of dialogue or, like, at a performance. This movie, I'm one of those people that when I'm watching something, I have a hard time watching things when it's cringy or embarrassing. Like, I literally have to put my hand over my face and kind of watch between my fingers.
Yeah.
And this was one of those movies where, I'm not joking, probably a quarter of it, I was cringing or watching between my fingers. And once again, if I'm comparing your movie to like David Ayer's Suicide Squad, which is widely known as such a failure of a movie and embarrassing for most people involved in it, it's terrible to be putting that in my brain 10 years later after that movie came out, making me think of, you know, God, what's his name? The guy from Morbius.
Jared Leto.
Jared Leto's Joker with the tattoos across his head and his grill and stuff. It's like, why on earth would you ever want to make something artistically that feels like it's derivative of that?
Yeah.
That's like a terrible aesthetic and a terrible choice to go in. I don't understand how you would ever think that's a great direction to move in.
Yeah, and I mean, another thing we overuse all the time, but it really applies here, is like, this just really felt as a hello fellow kids movement. Like, it just felt that Maggie Gyllenhaal was like, oh yeah, like, you know, the like teenage and 20-year-old girls are like really gonna, this is what they're into right now, is this kind of, like you said, I mean, it very much seems like this entire movie lives in that Jared Leto Joker Suicide world. Like, the aesthetic is almost exactly the same. And it's like, yeah, no, that, you know, that was cool 10 plus years ago. that's not really what anyone's on right now.
I mean, it wasn't cool 10 plus years ago, but yes, I guess it resonated with people that are looking for cool Halloween costumes. And I mean, yes, The Bride is going to be a killer Halloween costume next year for y'all to do it for, the dozens of people that have seen it in theaters and, probably the millions that'll see it when it's on Tubi and Amazon Prime and Netflix, even though they passed on it, which is also another damning thing for this movie, that it was supposed to be a Netflix movie and they were like, you know what? We're good. Netflix, who has had so many poor movies over the years debut on their platform, is thinking, you know what? We don't want this one. And especially with the talent attached, like you were talking to me before we started recording, and usually we don't even kind of share our thoughts on the movie beforehand, but we were kind of like running time, like waiting for Mike to show up for the main show. And you mentioned that this had the same cinematographer as Joker and Joker Folie à Deux. And I didn't know that when I went into the movie, but there was just something unmistakably Joker as I was watching the trailer and as I was watching the movie. But what's worse is it didn't capture the artistry of Joker and Joker Folie à Deux, which Folie à Deux is a bad movie, but the cinematography is gorgeous. Joker, whether or not you like one or two, the score is Oscar nominated and Oscar winning. Hildur does amazing work. The score in this was awful. I would have never known that this was actually the people behind some of these movies that I thought it very much felt like. It all felt like cheap, pale imitations that wasn't thought through. And I'm kind of shocked that they actually got the real creatives behind these other movies, because even though I don't think they're great films, it's like they excelled in different areas, where this felt like it excelled in nothing other than, once again, just being like, well, Jessie Buckley's a good actress, so every now and then she's going to have a good scene. Or Christian Bale's a good actor, so every now and then he's going to be, okay, yeah, I like this turn as Frankenstein in this specific moment. It's a baffling movie. And coming off of, like, spoilers for our discussion of Scream 7 last week, to come from that movie where I was like, this is terrible. This is a bad movie. It's creatively bankrupt. I wouldn't go so far to say this is creatively bankrupt. It's just basically everything that it's doing creatively I'm allergic to. I just can't stand like 90% of it. I always say nails on a chalkboard. This is nails on a chalkboard, the movie. It's a tough sit. So I don't know if we got anything else to discuss spoiler free. Should we just, are you going to recommend people check this one out in theaters or?
Yeah, I'm going to say no. I'd wait till streaming. This should have came out on Netflix, and I probably would have been a little kinder to it because I didn't waste my time going to the theater and paying, a bunch of money so I could sit through this for over 2 hours. So I'm going to give it a not recommend. How about yourself?
Yeah, I know. I wouldn't recommend people check this one out in theaters. And I didn't mention it, but this was a weird theater going experience for me where I saw it in IMAX. There was no ads. The movie just started instantly. And for that reason, I had people trickling in for the first 10 or 15 minutes as it was starting. And I was just thinking how terrible it would be to be one of those people, because you're missing some pretty key explanations as to what is happening in this movie that I couldn't even imagine sitting through it without that information. It would be so disorienting and baffling that, I couldn't imagine being one of those people. Granted, there was only like a dozen of us there, but probably half of us showed up 5 to 10 minutes into the movie and missing some pretty key pieces of information. So if you're going to check this one out in theaters, get there early so you don't miss anything important. But also, I mean, you do not have to see this in theaters. I do not think you're missing out on a cultural moment. I don't think it's bad enough that it warrants the steep ticket price. Even though I do want to support theaters as much as I can, it's just kind of go see something else in theaters. I mean, there's something you can go see that's would be more worth your money than this. So it seems like neither of us are recommending that you check this one out in theaters. And with that, I think it's time to cut to our spoiler discussion for The Bride. We are now in our spoiler discussion for The Bride. So if you've not seen The Bride, it's time to tune out and come back once you've seen the movie, or keep listening if you simply don't care. Rowan, we've been tiptoeing around a very key piece of information for this movie that I just want to launch this off with the idea of Mary Shelley's soul kind of haunting this movie. I think it's interesting conceptually. I think it actually does kind of work if you were gonna make a masterpiece of a fucking movie.
Yeah.
That you're like, listen, I'm gonna say that Frankenstein wasn't my seminal work. This wasn't the story I wanted to tell. I actually had this story about the bride that I was developing with all of my being, but this tumor in my head prevented me from telling it. And honestly, this story of the bride, it's not a ghost story or a horror story. More frighteningly, it's a love story. And I think, I really need to get it out there. And I loved this idea, and I loved the way it was portrayed for the first minute or two of the movie in black and white, as like Jessie Buckley's face is kind of dipping in and out of shadow, and she's almost spectral herself, filling the IMAX screen. And then she's kind of searching through this bar full of gangsters to find her, her character that's going to be the bride in this movie. And then it basically manifests in the form of like Victorian ghost Tourette's. And I just instantly thought, what a terrible way to do this. What like an atrocious way to bring the soul, the spirit of Mary Shelley onto the screen and kind of have it verbalized through this character in the form that essentially is just like a change in accent and just a line of flowery Victorian dialogue. Or, shouting cunt really harshly. It was so baffling. It was such a cool idea that if you were actually going to make a good movie, I thought was actually inspired. But instantly, within like 5 minutes, I go, oh no, never mind. This is just going to wind up being disrespectful, isn't it? And of course it is throughout the runtime of the movie.
Yeah, it's an interesting premise. I think it's a little too meta for what the movie could actually do. Just because obviously as it's going on, at first I was like very confused because I'm like, okay, so she, Mary Shelley created this story, but for some reason now in this world, this story's actually true. It's not a made up story. Although she says in the movie, like, it was a dare. I came up with this story or whatever. And I'm like, okay, well, that's weird because, like, Frankenstein's here, like, in this movie, and he's a real person. So, I don't really get how you're saying it's a story, but it is real and all this kind of stuff. But whatever, maybe it wants to be weird.
Well, I think it's literally taking shape as a sequel to Frankenstein. Like, we're watching the sequel to Frankenstein, where at the end of Frankenstein, he goes off and he's going to live in loneliness for the rest of his life. So it's kind of 100 years later, he's finding a bride, I
guess it's just, to me, it's kind of weird. And this is...
it is.
Yeah. This is where... Like I said, like, just to start this movie off, I'm like, oh, this is kind of really already getting off the rails. Because to me, this would make sense if Mary Shelley wrote a second book or something. But, like, Mary Shelley has nothing to do with the creation of the original Bride of Frankenstein. Like, that was literally just a big studio doing a spin-off of the Frankenstein movie, which, this movie doesn't overly mention, but, like, the movie is far different than the book. Like, they also butchered the portrayal of Frankenstein that we're kind of given in this movie is the portrayal of Frankenstein from the movie that also doesn't really resemble what she wrote anyway.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, she's very far removed. Like, Mary Shelley has nothing to do with the bride. So I guess my literal mind, I was like, I don't really understand why we're pretending that she wanted to write The Bride of Frankenstein and had that story, but died and couldn't tell it. But whatever. But yes, overall, the possession stuff I thought could kind of work at the beginning. I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting that, like you said, it's going to be this like split personality type thing. But even just by simple horror movie logic, like the laws of when it happened, like it just didn't make any sense to me. Like sometimes it's perfectly fine. It doesn't seem anything like necessarily sets it off. And then even when the bride is tapping into that side of her that is Shelley, sometimes that doesn't have any bearing on the story at all or anything. Like, I was just like, it seems like a device that they thought was cool, and then they didn't overly think out for the rest of the movie. It's just like, oh, this would be kind of cool if they, she just had all these split personalities. But I just also want to mention, seems very Harley Quinn-ish Suicide Squad also. So, maybe Megan Gyllenhaal just a huge fan of Suicide Squad.
Could be. Yeah. I think making this a sequel to Frankenstein, or at least having Mary Shelley tell you its importance, is a way of trying to make this movie feel more important than what it is. It's saying, you may have seen all these other stories and sequels to Frankenstein, but this is the one.
Yeah.
This is the one that my soul is going to tell. This was what I've always wanted to write. Frankenstein is this great work of Gothic literature, but it's nothing compared to this story. And then it develops over the course of 2 hours for just a movie that is largely garbage. In my opinion, basically just art, not really any artistry to it. I understand that as a movie, having the lack of agency as a woman in order to make the decision to choose your lover, to choose your name, or even, to be reanimated or live at all, is poignant to the message that she's trying to tell, that Maggie Gyllenhaal is trying to put on screen here. But I just couldn't help but feel that this movie was better handled in so many different cases. I mean, we mentioned numerous different Frankenstein riffs, and I don't think purely the existence of feminism in your movie makes it a superior movie. You have to develop those ideas and those thoughts into actually something that's coherent and something that might actually affect people. This is just, it winds up being a lot of the time a little bit better or a little bit more developed than that moment in Endgame where they're fighting Thanos at the end, and then all the women superheroes gather up, and they're basically like, settle down, boys, we got this. And it's supposed to be this empowering moment in the theater, but it just comes off as so pandering. And a lot of what was being dealt with, it's ideas that I think are better explored in a first year university English class. If you read Frankenstein in high school, you probably have explored some of these thoughts and feelings. Maybe not exactly through a feminist lens, but I'm sure you've explored some of what this movie's doing. So the thing when I was watching it, I was just like, how are you going to make The Bride and then also have a movie like Poor Things exist a couple years before? And I'm not going to come out here and say that Poor Things is a high watermark for feminism. It's directed by Yorgos Lanthimos, who I love, but as a dude. It's written by a dude. And I think a lot of what it's getting at in that movie is kind of problematic, and especially, the over portrayal of, Emma Stone and sexuality and whatnot in the movie. But what I'm saying is conceptually, a lot of these ideas were explored in that movie just a couple of years ago, that I don't care if you think that movie's problematic. I would be shocked if you would say that that movie is not a better film, even if you want to go in the basis of just filmmaking prowess.
Yeah.
You could be allergic to that movie and give it a 2-star, but just in terms of the acting, the writing, the filmmaking, it's a far more superior film. So to come out a couple years after that and explore a lot of the same topics, purely am I supposed to say that this is a better movie just on the basis of Maggie Gyllenhaal's gender, even if I don't believe that the themes are better explored? It was just something as I was watching it, it was just baffling to me. Is the idea of having a snippet of your story where a bunch of women adopt the similar makeup to the bride and shout brain attack in the streets as the women are kind of all realizing that they have their own form of agency, some nuanced, highbrow idea that I can't really fathom and I can't understand? It was just, a lot of it was just laughably corny. I don't know how anybody watches that sequence of the movie and realize that it's never going to be addressed hereafter, and it was barely addressed before it happened, and feel empowered or emboldened at all. It was just embarrassing.
Yeah, it's so mixed into the cringe stuff. I thought it was kind of funny because in the theater there was 2 women sitting in front of me, and they audibly laughed at the scene when they're in the ballroom and the bride's got a hostage and just starts screaming "Me Too" for 3 minutes straight.
That was what I was hinting at in the spoiler-free section, where it's just verbalizing the words of obviously a horrific thing that happened to hundreds of women, a movement in Hollywood of just, rampant sexual abuse. and misconduct. Obviously, that's upsetting and terrible. And as a dude, I can't, I guess, completely comprehend how you'd feel as a woman and obviously facing this in your day-to-day life. But I don't know if just simply having a hysterical character reanimated, screaming "Me Too" and stomping her feet like a child is an effective way to get your message across. Or once again, like a note that's supposed to be empowering. It's like loudly proclaiming something. I just don't know how it made it. Like, how is that impactful? Other than, it's, I don't know. It was just all these sorts of things. I understood what it was doing. I don't know if it was something that it wasn't for me. I just don't think it was something that was constructed well for anybody, other than if it's purely like you just want to hear "Me Too" verbalized in 2026.
See, this is where I had a lot of conflict, where I'd be curious. I mean, obviously, I'm a nobody. I'm not ever talking to Maggie Gyllenhaal, but like, I'm just interested in, especially like stuff like the Me Too scene and dealing with like a Me Too movement in the entertainment industry, but also like this weird perversion of this film that's so interested in this 20s, 30s era Hollywood, where it really is like kind of glamorizing, and they have this affection for these like musical romantic comedies. And I'm just like, it's kind of weird because I'm like, this is like a time in Hollywood that's like very misogynistic and not, a hotbed of like feminism for film. So I was like, it's just kind of weird that there's like this love for this period of film. And like I said, but yet, they're trying to give this message, and I was like, oh, it was kind of weird dichotomy to me. And I mean, I understand they can both exist, but I guess for me, I just found it hard to wrap my head around. Now, a more simplistic thing that I will say I did enjoy, like, I do think overall, like, the look of The Bride, I do like the look. I thought it worked in terms of just a visual. I wasn't fully on board with it, like, once everyone's also doing it, like, in the cities and stuff. But I thought for the visual, it was fine. I did really like when they are resurrecting the bride. I do like the idea of the black goo in like the containers and the black goo coming down, but totally mishandled. Like, I thought these scenes were very poorly lit, especially, when you're recreating like some of the most iconic scenes in film. And like, I remember when we talked about Frankenstein on the pod, these are like still hold up as these like iconic sets, and just like the detail in these sets of all the machinery and all the electricity running through them and everything. And like, I thought this was decorated so lazily. Like, this whole area was just like, it just looked terrible. With like, what's the doctor's name?
Dr. Euphronius.
Yeah, Dr. Euphronius.
Annette Bening is playing it, yeah.
I was just like, when they're resurrecting the bride, it's like we can't see anything. They dim it so low that you can't see any bad special effects or anything like that. And I was like, this is where it should really shine. Like, this is where the original shine are these set pieces, and you're just giving me like garbage.
Well, even when you're talking about it being dimly lit or not staging it well, it then veers into another direction of being like a surreal outer body experience with like soul and flying through the air and kind of touching bulbs and stuff like that. And all of that didn't work for me either, because just like as a visual effect, it didn't look good. And it was also just goofy. It was like a lot of what was in this movie. It just tonally didn't work for me. It was just a silly sequence.
It wasn't for me. And, another big issue with this also is I just thought there was too many ideas, too many plots packed into this.
Yes.
We have like this whole, obviously, we have the Ida side of the bride, which, there this whole tale of, these kind of like New York, Chicago gangsters and
mobsters cutting out the tongues of women, preying on, women that are often discarded or ignored by society because the police aren't going to investigate them. These are real problems, and still problems that persist to this day, that could be effectively explored as just the key core and tenet of this narrative. but I assume you're going to talk about all the other plots as well.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like there's so many plots, and I don't think they do any of them real justice, because you have that. Then, tied into that, we have the two detectives, Penelope Cruz and Peter Sarsgaard, which, like, why they're there, I feel like you could have cut all the detective stuff out and would make zero difference. They have no over real bearing other than kind of chasing these guys around the country, and when we're in the kind of the Bonnie and Clyde section of this. But realistically, any cop, you could have just cops in general chasing them around.
Yeah, the importance of these two, I'm sure you know the idea, but I'll just say it for the listeners if you haven't listened to the movie. The importance of this is having a woman who's supposed to be portrayed as capable being passed over for a job that she's more than capable to perform. But what I'm going to say is that the way that Penelope Cruz's character, Myrna, is portrayed in the movie, the detective narrative isn't fleshed out enough to have kind of these ideas of like needing key pieces of information filled in, and then she solves it. Yeah. It is so thinly developed that it's most of the time just Peter Sarsgaard and Penelope Cruz talking vaguely about the case, and then also saying like, oh, well, you've always been a good detective, or oh, you've always been better at this than me. But once again, we don't ever see her do anything of note. Literally, she gets the promotion or gets the detective job that apparently she has earned and should have had, just because Peter Sarsgaard's Jake gets tired and retires, and as a term of his retirement, he's saying, oh, I get to choose my successor and I'm going to choose you. And then we get this corny ass scene where there's a bunch of schlubby police officers all hanging around and kind of talking to one another about proper police protocol, and basically she starts kind of barking orders at them, and then they're answering and obeying, and then there's a moment of like, well, why? What? Wait now. Who are you? Why are we listening to you? And she has some line that's like, well, I'm the detective, or I'm Detective so-and-so, your boss, or something like that, that it's just, once again, I'm wondering, like, who thinks that this is a clever reveal or a clever scene in 2026? It's so embarrassing. And Penelope Cruz in this movie, like, she is so checked out, giving, like, the worst performance I've seen in a long time. Well, that's unfair because there's loads of terrible performances to Scream. But I mean, for Penelope Cruz, she's just giving nothing to this role. And once again, she has nothing to work with. We're being told that she's a great detective and she does nothing. She solves nothing throughout this movie other than essentially being like, oh, there's a bunch of people running in this direction, so let's go against the people running because they're probably running from a monster. Or being like, oh, we picked up a ticket for a theater, so let's check out theaters for the monsters. It's like, it's not genius detective work what we're dealing with here.
Not at all. She's doing pretty much the most basic stuff, which, like you said, is a shame because it'd be nice to see her solving.
Listen, I would love to see the movie that is Ida, who's a call girl or at least mistreated by the mob, being reborn as basically this harbinger of vengeance for these murdered and missing women. And then you also have a really good detective narrative about trying to track down, I don't know, who's killing off these mobsters in brutal ways. But also, personally, they're kind of agreeing that these guys are shitty and maybe they should be killed off. And you kind of have this game of cat and mouse, and she kind of makes her way through killing a lot of these Chicago gangsters. This is not the movie we got, like, whatsoever. It is like a footnote in the movie, either of these plots. And they only come up when convenient because you need a bout of, like, action for a firefight, or you need to have a quick kill, and it's just nonsense. The other narrative that you haven't mentioned, of course, is the love story, which we've been told right from the opening of the movie that this is the most important and terrifying love story that we've ever seen, and the movie ends on them dying together but then also being reborn together in love and holding hands. And I'm gonna just say it, there is zero chemistry between Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley. There is more chemistry for Christian Bale looking at Jake Gyllenhaal on a theater screen dancing around than there is with the bride sat right next to him. I just got nothing from these two, which is a shame because they're both good actors in their own right, but they just couldn't convince me for a second that they felt any amount of love for one another.
Yeah, no, and I mean, it makes sense for some of the movie because obviously it takes a long time in this movie for the bride to kind of, fall in love with Frankie. And so that makes sense. But yeah, even when we're supposed to be in the full throes of like, I'm his, he's mine, Yeah, it's not believable whatsoever. And this is just like one of those things that I think's really unfortunate, because going into this, I am far more interested in knowing about the bride. But then when I'm watching it, and I don't know if it's just Christian Bale being Christian Bale or whatnot, but I was like, it seems to me that Frankie is the far more fleshed out and interesting character in this, and has the more interesting kind of, complicated feelings and thoughts in this, that I'm just like, it's a real shame, because I think so much of these plots and stories are such a mess on the Ida side that it just seemed like the Frankenstein monster stuff is way more fleshed out. And I was just like, I'm more interested in what's mentally going on with him than I am the bride just like screaming and yelling every 5 seconds.
Well, like, the reason why is because his narrative is just basically like one narrative.
Yeah.
Right? It's like one plot line. And even though it's not incredibly novel, I mean, it's the story of Frankenstein. He's lonely. He needs a bride. He gets a bride.
He's misunderstood.
He's misunderstood. And the one distinguishing feature of this movie is that he's a film buff who basically keeps rewatching the same Jake Gyllenhaal movie over and over again, which I know as a fan of Nightcrawler that, I've been there. I've watched a lot of Jake Gyllenhaal movies over and over again. He's a great actor. But he's kind of like a dude who takes solace in cinema. So for a lot of people that are going to see this movie, they could probably see themselves in Frankenstein a little bit, as cinema as an escape, as, when you're feeling like shit, if you're having a mental crisis like Frankenstein does at one point in this movie, where does he go? He seeks solace in the cinema. So he has an interesting narrative, I guess, or at least it's a coherent narrative for the run of the movie, where once again, Jessie Buckley's bride character is fractured, embroiled in a bunch of these different plot lines. And the character itself is just abrasive. It's yelling, it's all fury. And sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. And yeah, it's like, as I was watching the movie, I did enjoy Christian Bale's Frankenstein every now and then, probably a little bit more than Jessie Buckley. Even though as actors, if you told me like, Colton, you can go see a Christian Bale movie or a Jessie Buckley movie, at this stage in their careers, I'm going Jessie Buckley.
Yeah, 100%.
Every time. So, but like in this movie, for whatever reason, I was like, you know what? I kind of like this older, depressed, kind of gaunt Frankenstein. And then, you get Jessie Buckley yelling all the time. I didn't really enjoy too much.
Maybe I would have connected more with this movie in general if, after they get together, they go to their, they go to their first theater because they got to see, the Jake Gyllenhaal movie, and maybe they're watching Roadhouse. And then I'm okay, yeah, I get it, Frankie, I understand. And then, they commit some crimes, go to New York. Then they got to go watch Spider-Man Far From Home. And then I think you bring it home at the end, and they watch Ambulance in the drive-in scene. I think that's
I still haven't seen that one, but I've heard only good things.
Only good things from Michael Bay.
Yeah. I mean, throughout the movie, there's some bouts of gore. I guess we haven't discussed if this movie as a horror movie, quote unquote, at all. And I mean, to call this movie a horror movie, I think this might be one of the least horrifying movies.
Yeah,
outside of just the quality of it that we've discussed on the podcast. It's like, we get a scene early on where Jessie Buckley and Frankie, as soon as she's reanimated, they go to a queer bar, a gay bar. It's seeming like in the movie, and then they leave.
Yeah, it seems like it's like a queer bar. There's a lot of drag going on and stuff, where some of the most atrocious music is being played. Like, it doesn't sound good.
I would also say probably some of the most atrocious dance moves from Jessie Buckley as well. But I mean,
100%.
At that point in a reanimation, and probably some of it's intentional, obviously. But
I got what they were trying to do. I'm like, they're trying to create this weird 30s world, but the music they're playing is like music that wouldn't exist till like way at like 2010. And it's just like, it sounds bizarre, and it just sounds bizarre to sound bizarre. Like, there's no real purpose to it other than to be like, look how cool I am, look how edgy I am.
But also, for the purpose of the movie, these two mobsters that I don't know, were they at the bar as well? It just, I mean, it doesn't seem like a space that they would be occupying, but
I wouldn't say mobsters. They were kind of just like drunkards, kind of guys partying.
Okay.
Yeah.
It seemed like, the way I read it, it seemed like they were part of that criminal organization, but maybe not. Either way, they both get fucked up by Frankenstein. You know, he like curb stomps one brutally and just smashes another one against the wall. And I was like, okay, all right, bit of blood and gore. And then you sit there and there's no blood and gore for the next hour and 15 minutes of the movie. There's a scene where a couple of cops get shot in the head near the end of it. There's obviously one of them is groping Jessie Buckley's the bride, and you know, obviously a very uncomfortable manner, and just keeps going and going and going. Thankfully, he gets what's coming to him. But in terms of a horror movie, there's very little blood and guts or anything that's going to satisfy listeners of a horror movie podcast, I think, in this movie.
Yeah, no, there isn't. Well, and see, to me, that's what's yet again just atrocious and unforgivable of this, because to me, that's yet again another thing that doesn't make this punk rock, which it thinks it is it, other than like one or two scenes, it's fairly bloodless or goreless for a horror movie, and it's just so intentional, because like I can just see where it's like, yeah, like you know who's gonna love this? It's like 14-year-olds. They're gonna really love this. We got to make sure.
Yeah, and then by rights, they wouldn't even be able to make it into the movie because it's rated R.
Yeah, especially if you're in the States. It's 14 in Canada on the Cineplex app. I looked, it's 14.
Okay, all right.
So, but I mean, this is just more of my rant of like, you know, it might as well be produced by Hot Topic. Like, it's aimed at just like lowest common denominator. That's what it seems.
One scene that everyone keeps talking about, and I'm gonna say, when I was watching it in a vacuum as a music video, I sort of enjoyed the big ballroom dance, I guess, near the end, but it was purely just because it's something different and it shakes you out of the movie you've been watching for the past hour and 40 minutes.
I fucking hated it.
Okay, good. I'm just glad that I just wanted to verbalize that it existed in the movie. I kind of liked it just as a standalone little sequence, and if you put like the Monster Mash over it, I'd be like, that's fine, whatever. But yeah, in terms of the world of the movie we created, I don't know if I really needed it. And of course, it ends in the standoff, the Me Too, her getting eventually mowed down in a blaze of bullets, and essentially roll credits almost at that point.
Yeah, I was so mad at that ballroom scene just because there's just a tone in the movie that it's like, wow, look what we did. This like crazy ballroom scene. It's like, I don't know.
You're right. 100%. They're very proud of the dance number they've staged.
And I'm like, I don't know. I saw Babylon. I've seen like 800 movies in the last couple of years that do this exact same thing. And it's just... And like I said, that's continues to be the problem with this movie gives you this attitude like they're the first to ever do any of this stuff. And it's like, nope, you are 10 years late to the show.
Yeah. Also a bit of a strange scene before the dance sequence, just with the Jake Gyllenhaal and the Christian Bale of it all. And I'm not sure why we had to take Jake Gyllenhaal off the screen just to make him an asshole for this one scene before a dance sequence and all this stuff. I don't know. Once again, it's like an idea of like, well, maybe don't meet your idols and they'll be assholes, and, you know, talking about showbiz isn't all what it's cracked up to be. But it was just for me. I just wanted to give lip service purely to the dance scene that I thought was all right and you hated.
Frankie should have just told him and just said, Ronnie, I can't quit you.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, and then a real romance develops.
That's right.
Yeah, we get some real chemistry there. Yeah, I mean, could have been interesting for sure. Monster Mash, crash, ending credits. How quickly did you leave the theater as soon as Monster Mash hit?
So I stuck around a little bit. I was just
Did I miss anything? Was there something after the credits? Was it, this beautiful sequence?
No, they play Monster Mash. I feel like they show like swipes of something, but it's not like anything to do with the movie. It's just, there's like pictures or something going on. Mm-hmm. There was nothing special going on here.
Yeah, I heard Monster Mash kind of ramping up as like, they're being reanimated and they hold hands. And I was kind of like, listen, it's a fun note to end the movie on. I kind of wish the whole vibe of the movie was Monster Mash, or it was a movie that was sensible. which was not what I just sat through. And I raced out of there. And to tell you the truth, I was the only one that raced out of there. So maybe everyone enjoyed it. I have no idea. I didn't stick around to see the looks on people's faces or the general energy of the 10 or so people as we were leaving. But
you don't think it should have ended with some 21 pilots just playing at the end of it, just like Suicide Squad?
Oof, maybe it should have. It probably would have been like more in tune with just how bad it was. Monster Mash is a jam, so the end with Monster Mash, it's kind of like, you know, it's better than the movie we just experienced.
Do you think the packaging for the Frankie and Bri costumes will be next to the Harley Quinn and Joker costumes at like Spirit Halloween and Hot Topic?
Yeah, they're birds of a feather, you know. Absolutely. Anything else you want to discuss before we get into rating this?
I can't wait to get done with this.
So if you're new to the podcast, our review rubric is nay, okay, yay, or slay. So Rowan, what would you give The Bride?
I'm just a man of negativity these last couple now slayings. This is like 100% a nay. Like I said, I cringed the entire time I was in the theater. I was you, just hand on my face. I felt cringe for them in the movie, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe Jesse Buckley and Christian Bale had to do this. Like, I can't believe it. Well, I feel, what's wrong? Is there something going on I don't know about in their careers that it's this hard up? Because, nothing about this worked. Like you said, you know, obviously there were some issues with this when Netflix is passing on it. This to me definitely probably would have been more comfortable on a streamer than, you know, in the theater. I always appreciate people taking huge swings, but when you take a huge swing, you also got to be prepared to, you know, just whiff it and take a huge miss. And unfortunately, I think this is far, far more misses in this than there is anything that hits. Like I said, I give credit to the performances. I think they did the best with what they were given. You know, Jessie Buckley, I think it really is doing the best she can. Unfortunately, I think Christian Bale's just given, as you said, with him not having to deal with so many plots that aren't fleshed out, he's able to kind of channel his character a little more and make it a little more, I think, sincere and interesting and a little more focused. And yeah, I just think overall, I did like some of the look, as I said before, the bride and kind of, you know, the ooze or whatever. But overall, I don't think it looks good. I didn't think a lot of this functioned well as a movie, period. And it just kind of seemed like someone made this that was very confused at what they wanted to make or was way too try hard when making it. To me, this is like what they invented the term edgelord for. This is like for an edgelord, 100%. I always tease Jill calling her an edgelord. We've already made the joke. Jill's probably going to love this movie.
Yeah, I mean that with all sincerity, not even just to dunk on her. Obviously, we joke with Jill lovingly, but for whatever reason, I feel like she's going to love this as well.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're listening to this and you want us murdered right now, just wait for the next episode when she goes sees it and she talks about it, because I'm sure she'll love it. So, you know, there you go. So yeah, I'm going to give it a nay. What about you?
Yeah, it should be no surprise to anybody. I mean, I'm also giving this a nay. Artistically, I think there's nothing in this movie really that works for me other than the mere existence of two actors that I enjoy. You know, I really like Jessie Buckley. I think she has a great career ahead of her. I mean, I'm rooting for her. I believe she's going to win the Oscar this year. And obviously Christian Bale, I mean, he has a great career behind him already, and hopefully he has some more performances in him that are better than this. Or in a movie that's better than this. It's unfair because, like I said, he's fine with what he's doing. But outside of literally their mere inclusion, the idea of a movie being haunted by the spirit of Mary Shelley, who wrote one novel, such a work of horror gothic literature. So if they could have really delivered on an absolutely excellent horror movie that's a sequel to Frankenstein or a derivative work of it, I would have liked that idea. And staging a coherent dance sequence that we didn't talk about the cinematography for this movie, but a lot of it to me was way too close and way too shaky and not at all like Joker even though it's the same cinematographer in my opinion. So this was one of the few sequences that seemed to be shot appropriately that, for a music video is fine. I don't know, man. This is not for me. And I'm gonna agree with people that it wasn't made for me. It wasn't meant for me because this is trash. And if you like this, all power to you. But listen, our opinions on movies are never gonna line up. And I don't necessarily just think I'm this misogynist pig because I don't like this movie, which I feel like there's a little bit of a sentiment of that going around online. I think with this and Scream 7. We've covered a lot of movies on Now Slang. It's over 100 now. And I think for me, once again, missing a lot of episodes, this is a very tough 1-2 punch of these two movies back to back. This is like some of the worst movies that we've covered in quick succession on this show. So yeah, this is a nay from me. It's like a nay with prejudice. I think it's only interesting on streaming as a pure like case study, just to see what went wrong. Not as something like as an actual film. And I don't know. Maggie Gyllenhaal is 2 for 2 for me in terms of striking out. This isn't it.
You're gonna need to go cleanse your palate and watch Five Nights at Freddy's 2 again.
It is crazy to sit here and be like, you know what? Five Nights at Freddy's 2, better film than Scream 7, better film than The Bride. And it does not fill me with happiness to say that, but that's what I believe. So if you're new to the show and you're not following us already, you could do so at It Slays Podcast. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Slasher, Letterboxd, Threads, Bluesky, TikTok. If there's a social media, we're probably there at It Slays Podcast. And if you want to help support the show financially, like our horror hounds Holly, Nicholas, Mark, Steven, Dan, Brian, Trevor, OG James, and Philip, gain access to the Patreon exclusive show Stream Screams, hosted by Jill, and get episodes of the main show 48 hours early. Be sure to head on over to patreon.com/itslayspodcast and choose whatever tier works best for you. Rowan, is Monster Mash already on the playlist? I mean,
I think it is already. If it's
okay,
not,
well, I mean,
double check.
Outside of that, there's nothing else that's worthy.
No, there really isn't. So you can go over to the It Slays Podcast Terrific playlist on Spotify. If you have any problems finding it, you can go to any of the social media that Colton just mentioned, go into the bio, click the Linktree link, and there's a button that will take you directly there. We upload scores or licensed music from iconic horror movies we review, or just horror movies we love. We update it regularly, so give it a follow and get your spooky music on, because why the hell not?
And next time on the show, it looks like we're going to be checking out, I hope, A24's Undertone.
Oh, yeah.
I've been avoiding the trailers.
Same.
I don't really know what it's about too much other than a scary noise. But all I've heard is that this one's scary as hell, so I can't wait to check this one out in a week or two. And with that, I think that about wraps things up for this episode. So until next time, I'm Colton.
I'm Rowan.
And as long as you keep listening, we'll keep slaying.